Welcome back to Grim Advice with Gretta Myers. You've entered the grimoire, so let's turn another page together. Today's, if I believe correctly, is Snow White. However, I don't have the book out yet because I have a cat on my lap. And so if I squeal in pain, it is because he is kneading his tiny claws into me. Also because I fell down the stairs yesterday and hurt myself. I have a sprained sore something foot. It's not broken, but it hurts. So here we are. Alright, I'll check now. Don't hate me, cat. Where are you going? What are you doing? Ah!
He's just looking at the book.
It is Snow White. It's called, without further ado, Little Snow White. Once upon a time in the middle of winter, when the flakes of snow were falling like feathers from the sky, oh my goodness, he totally just knocked the book and now it's gone. I apologize. I'm back. Okay, we're back. Once upon a time in the middle of winter, when the flakes of snow were falling like feathers from the sky, a queen sat at a window sewing, and the frame of the window was made of black ebony, and while she was sewing and looking out of the window at the snow, she pricked her finger with the needle, and 3 drops of blood fell upon the snow. And the red looked pretty upon the white snow, and she thought to herself, if only I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood of the window frame. Soon after that, she had a little daughter who was as white as snow and as red as blood, and her hair was as black as ebony, and she was therefore called Little Snow White. And when the child was born, the queen died. And after a year had passed, the king took another wife. She was a beautiful woman, but proud and haughty, and she could not bear that anyone else should surpass her in beauty. She had a wonderful looking-glass, and when she stood in front of it and looked at herself in it and said, looking-glass on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all? The looking-glass answered, why, you, O queen, are the fairest of all. Then she was satisfied, for she knew that the looking-glass spoke the truth. But Snow White was growing up and grew more and more beautiful, and when she was 7 years old, she was as beautiful as the day, and more beautiful than the queen herself. And once when the queen asked her looking-glass on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all? It answered, you are fairer than all who are here, Lady Queen, but more beautiful still is Snow White, as I ween. Then the queen was shocked, and turned yellow and green with envy, and from that time, whenever she looked at Snow White, her heart heaved in her chest. She hated the girl so much. And envy and pride grew higher and higher in her heart like a weed, so that she had no peace day or night. She called a hunter and said, take the child away into the forest. I will no longer have her in my sight. Kill her and bring me back her heart as a token. The hunter obeyed and took her away. But when he had drawn his knife and was about to pierce Snow White's innocent heart, she began to weep and said, ah, dear hunter, spare my life. I will run away into the wild forest and never come home again. And as she was so beautiful, the hunter had pity on her and said, run away then, you poor child. The wild beast will soon devour you, thought he, and yet it seemed as if a stone had been rolled from his heart, since he no longer needed to kill her. And as a young boar just then came running by, he stabbed it, cut out its heart, and took it to the queen as proof that the child was dead. The cook had to salt this, and the wicked queen ate it, and thought she had eaten the heart of Snow White. But now the poor child was all alone in the great forest, and so terrified that she looked at every leaf of every tree and did not know what to do. Then she began to run and ran over sharp stones and through thorns, and the wild beast ran past her, but did her no harm. She ran as far as her feet would go until it was almost evening. Then she saw a little cottage and went in to rest. Everything in the cottage was small, but neater and cleaner than you can imagine. There was a table on which was a white cover and 7 little plates, and on each little plate a little spoon. Moreover, there were 7 little knives and forks, and 7 little mugs, and against the wall stood 7 little beds side by side and covered with snow-white bedspreads. Little Snow White was so hungry and thirsty that she ate some vegetables and bread from each plate and drank a drop of wine out of each mug, for she did not wish to take all from only one. Then, as she was so tired, she laid herself down on each of the little beds, but none of them suited her. One was too long, another too short, but at last she found that the 7th one was right, and so she remained in it, said a prayer, and went to sleep. When it was quite dark, the owners of the cottage came back. They were 7 dwarves who dug and delved in the mountains for ore. They lit their 7 candles, and now that the cottage was lit, they saw that someone had been there, for everything was not in the same order in which they had left it. The first said, "Who has been sitting on my chair?" The second one, "Who has been eating off my plate?" The third said, "Who has been taking some of my bread?" The fourth, "Who has been eating my vegetables?" And the fifth, "Who has been using my fork?" The sixth, "Who has been cutting with my knife?" And the seventh, "Who has been drinking out of my mug?" Then the first looked round and saw that there was a little hole on his bed, and he said, "Who's been getting into my bed?" And the others came up and each called out, "Somebody's been lying in my bed too." But the seventh, when he looked at his bed, saw little Snow White, who was lying asleep in it. And he called the others, who came running up, and they cried out with astonishment, and brought their 7 little candles, and let the light fall on little Snow White. "Oh heavens, cried they, "what a lovely child!" And they were so glad that they did not wake her up, but let her sleep in the bed. And the 7th dwarf slept with his companions on 1 hour with each, and so got through the night. When it was morning, little Snow White awoke, and was frightened when she saw the 7 dwarves. But they were friendly and asked her what her name was. "My name is Snow White," she answered. "How have you come to our house?" said the dwarves. Then she told them that her stepmother had wished to have her killed, but that the hunter had spared her life, and that she had run for the whole day until at last she had found their dwelling. The dwarves said, "If you will take care of our house, cook, make the beds, wash, sew, and knit, and if you will keep everything neat and clean, you can stay with us, and you shall want for nothing." "Yes," said Snow White, "with all my heart." And she stayed with them. She kept the house in order for them. In the mornings they went to the mountains and looked for copper and gold. In the evenings they came back, and then their supper had to be ready. The girl was alone the whole day, so the good dwarves warned her and said, "Beware of your stepmother. She will soon know that you are here. Be sure to let no one come in." But the queen, believing that she had eaten Snow White's heart, was certain that she was again the first and most beautiful of all. And she went to her looking-glass and said, "Looking glass on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" And the glass answered, "O Queen, you are the fairest of all I see, but over the hills where the 7 dwarves lie, Snow White is still alive and well, and none is so fair as she." Then she was astounded, for she knew that the looking-glass never spoke falsely, and she knew that the hunter had betrayed her, and that little Snow White was still alive. And so she thought and thought again how she might kill her, for so long as she was not the fairest in the whole land, envy let her have no rest. And when she had at last thought of something to do, she painted her face and dressed herself like an old peddler, and no one could have known her. In this disguise she went over the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarves, and knocked at the door and said, "Pretty things to sell, very cheap, very cheap." Little Snow White looked at the window and called out, "Good day, my good woman. What have you to sell?" "Good things, pretty things," she answered, "laces of all colors." And she pulled out one which was woven of bright-colored silk. "I may let the worthy old woman in," thought Snow White, and she unbolted the door and bought the pretty laces. "Child," said the old woman, "what a fright you look. Come, I will lace you properly for once." Snow White had no suspicion, but stood before her and let herself be laced with the new laces. But the old woman laced so quickly and so tightly that Snow White lost her breath and fell down as if dead. "Now I am the most beautiful," said the queen to herself, and ran away. Not long afterwards in the evening the 7 dwarves came home, but were shocked when they saw their dear little Snow White lying on the ground, and that she neither stirred nor moved and seemed to be dead. They lifted her up. As they saw that she was laced too tightly, they cut the laces. Then she began to breathe a little, and after a while came to life again. When the dwarves heard what had happened, they said, "The old peddler was none other than the wicked queen. Take care and let no one come in when we are not with you." But the wicked woman, when she had reached home, went in front of the glass and asked, looking glass on the wall, "Who in this land is fairest of all?" And it answered as before, "O Queen, you are fairest of all I see, but over the hills where the 7 dwarves dwell, Snow White is still alive and well, and none is so fair as she." And when she heard that, all her blood rushed to her heart with fear, for she saw plainly that little Snow White was alive again. "But now," she said, "I will think of something that shall put an end to you." And by the help of witchcraft, which she understood, she made a poisonous comb, Then she disguised herself and took the shape of another old woman. So she went over the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarves and knocked at the door and cried, "Good things to sell, cheap, cheap." Little Snow White looked out and said, "Go away, I cannot let anyone come in." "I suppose you can look," said the old woman, and pulled the poisonous comb out and held it up. It pleased the girl so well that she let herself be fooled and opened the door. When they had struck a bargain, the old woman said, "Now I will comb you properly for once." Poor little Snow White had no suspicion and let the old woman do as she pleased. But hardly had she put the comb in her hair than the poison in it took effect, and the girl fell down senseless. "You paragon of beauty," said the wicked woman, "you are done for good." And she went away. But fortunately it was almost evening when the 7 dwarves came home. When they saw Snow White lying as if dead upon the ground, they at once suspected the stepmother, and they looked and found the poisonous comb. Scarcely had they taken it out when Snow White came to and told them what had happened. Then they warned her once more to be upon her guard and to open the door to no one. The queen at home went in front of the looking-glass and said, looking glass on the wall, who in this land is fairest of all?" Then it answered as before, "O queen, you are fairest of all I see, but over the hills where the 7 dwarfs dwell, Snow White is still alive and well, and none is so fair as she." When she heard the glass speak, she trembled and shook with rage. "Snow White shall die," she cried, "even if it cost me my life." With that she went into a quite secret, lonely room where no one ever came, and there she made a very poisonous apple. Outside it looked pretty, white with a red cheek, and so that everyone who saw it longed for it, but whoever ate a piece of it must surely die. When the apple was ready, she painted her face and dressed herself up as a countrywoman, and so she went over the 7 mountains to the 7 dwarves. She knocked at the door. Snow White put her head out of the window and said, "I cannot let anyone in. The 7 dwarves have forbidden me." "It is all the same to me," answered the woman. "I shall soon get rid of my apples. Here, I will give you one." "No," said Snow White, "I dare not take anything." "Are you afraid of poison?" said the old woman. "Look, I will cut the apple in 2 pieces. You eat the red cheek, and I will eat the white." The apple was so cunningly made that only the red cheek was poisoned. Snow White longed for the fine apple, and when she saw the woman eat part of it, she could resist no longer, and stretched out her hand and took the poisonous half. But hardly had she taken a bite that she fell down dead. Then the queen looked at her with a dreadful look and laughed aloud and said, "White as snow, red as blood, black as ebony wood. This time the dwarves cannot wake you up again." And when she asked the looking-glass at home, looking glass on the wall, "Who in this land is the fairest of all?" it answered at last, "O queen, in this land you are the fairest of all." Then her envious heart had rest, so far as an envious heart can have rest. The dwarves, when they had come home in the evening, found Snow White lying upon the ground. She breathed no longer and was dead. They lifted her up, looked to see whether they could find anything poisonous, unlaced her, combed her hair, washed her with water and wine, but it was all of no use. The poor child was dead, and remained dead. They laid her upon a bier, and all 7 of them sat round it and wept for her, and wept 3 days long. Then they were going to bury her, but she still looked as if she were alive, and still had her pretty red cheeks. They said, "We could not bury her in the dark ground," and they had a transparent coffin of glass made, so that she could be seen from all sides, and they laid her in it, and in golden letters wrote upon it in her name, and said that she was a king's daughter. Then they put the coffin out upon the mountain, and one of them always stayed by and watched it. The birds came too and wept for Snow White, first an owl, then a raven, and last a dove. And now Snow White lay a long, long time in the coffin, and she did not change, but looked as if she were asleep, for she was as white as snow, as red as blood, and her hair was as black as ebony. It happened, however, that a king's son came into the forest, and went to the dwarf's house to spend the night. He saw the coffin on the mountain, and the beautiful Snow White inside it, and read that what was written upon it in golden letters. Then he said to the dwarves, "Let me have the coffin, I will give you whatever you want for it." But the dwarves answered, "We will not part with it for all the gold in the world." Then he said, "Let me have it as a gift, for I cannot live without seeing Snow White. I will honor and prize her as my dearest possession." As he spoke in this way, the good dwarves took pity upon him and gave him the coffin. And now the king's son had it carried away by his servants on their shoulders. It happened that they stumbled over a tree stump, and with the shock the poisonous piece of apple which Snow White had bitten off came out of her throat. Before long she opened her eyes, lifted up the lid of the coffin, sat up, and was once more alive. "Oh, heavens, where am I?" she cried. The king's son, full of joy, said, "You are with me," and told her what had happened, and she said, "I love you more than everything in the world. Come with me to my father's palace, you shall be my wife." I'm all choked up. And Snow White was willing and went with him, and their wedding was held with great show and splendor. But Snow White's wicked stepmother was also invited to the feast, and when she had dressed herself in beautiful clothes, she went before the looking-glass and said, looking glass on the wall, "Who in this land is the fairest of all?" The glass answered, "O queen, of all here is the fairest is you, but the young queen is fairer by far, it is true." Then the wicked woman uttered a curse, and was so miserable, so utterly miserable, that she knew not what to do. At first, she would not go to the wedding at all, but she had no peace and must go to see the young queen. And when she went in, she knew Snow White, and she stood still with rage and fear and could not stir. But iron slippers had already been put upon the fire, and they were brought in with tongs and set before her. Then she was forced to put on the red-hot shoes and dance until she dropped down dead. Wow. Whew! Okay, hold on. Let me go back. There were a couple things I wanted to say. Okay, I'm sorry. You're sitting there, you're knitting or crocheting or whatever the heck she was doing, and she pricks herself enough that it draws blood, and her first thought is not immediately, "Ow!" or "Dang!" or "That hurt!" or "Am I okay?" No, it's the aesthetic. It's so aesthetic. Just like the black and the white and the red. And that's... Okay, if you're decorating your palace, maybe. Sure, black, white, and red. They're fine. Like, they go well together. But on a child? On a human person? No? No? Okay. Coming back to that in a second. Okay, and then the dwarves. I love how a lot of times people just display the dwarves as like slobs, and so they needed a woman in their life to not be gross and slobs. No, false. No, like it says right here, like they were clean. They liked their clean life. And just took Snow White in out of the kindness of their little tiny hearts. I say tiny, not because their hearts are small, because metaphorically, I mean literally, because they're dwarves. Also, like Snow White, goes and sleeps in one of the beds, right? And I love how they're like, we don't want to disturb her, so I'm gonna sleep, we're gonna proportion. One night, I will sleep in somebody else's bed, dude, that's heartwarming. The math that these people, and she was like, I will take a little bit from each plate. My goodness. It was heartwarming. It was cute. Okay, but then, they come into the house and they're all like, somebody's been touching my food. Which is, she said she did a small and then a drop from each mug. Yeah. But they don't immediately go, somebody's in that bed right there. You know? It just kind of cracks me up. It's fine. Coming back to that. Okay, the comb. The second she puts it in Snow White's hair, Snow White's like, dead. But, she touched it to do that. So, it does state later that she can, very specifically make an apple so that half is poison, but half is not. But why didn't it specify that only, the tines, the teeth of the comb were the poison, if you're gonna be specific later on, why not be specific? It's fine. I was just like, wait a second. It's so poisonous that the second, but she can touch it, and the dwarves can touch it, and they're fine. I also love, hold on. I also love how, Snow White, like, finally, like, the apple gets her, and so they're, like, they don't see anything's wrong, like, that's been wrong, and, like, they, like, fix her hair, there's, like, nope, nothing in her hair, they undo the laces, they're like, no, she's not laced too tightly, like, they're smart about it, they, like, give her a bath, see if, like, she's overheated or something, they're smart about it, and, like, they immediately suspect, they're like, it's that stepmother woman, No, go away, cat. Like, I just love the character these dwarves have. And we don't get that anywhere else. You hear Snow White 1,000 times, but the dwarves are, like, bowled over. They're like, oh yeah, they're dudes who live in the forest, and they're slobs, and they're just kind of dumb. But no, they like, they are not dumb. And they are, like, super kind and super nice. And, like, let me see if there's anything else I want to say before I, like, elaborate on how, like, they're not dumb. Okay, the king's son is like, can I have this coffin? Because she's pretty. Like, I get that she hasn't decayed yet, but that's still weird. But that's great. Everything works out in the end. I'm coming back to that later. So back to the dwarves. Not only are they, like, they do their life very, like, they mine, but then they come home and they want to be super clean and just, they're good, and, you know, they do their best. And then like, the what I already said, like, they cut the laces, they check the hair, like, they were smart and very critical about, like, what do we need to, like, look for, like, what's wrong here. Ugh, like, man, that just makes me so happy. And I'm so sad that the dwarves do not get the 7 dwarves in almost every retelling of Snow White I've assimilated, witnessed, partaken of, read, seen, etc., has portrayed the dwarves as just these kind of dumb guys who live in the, like a frat party, like a bachelor party. They're just in the woods constantly, and they're just dumb, but they're not. And in the movies, a lot of people are like, well, why didn't, like, they left her alone in the woods, and her stepmother's out to get her. 1, mines are unsafe. So bringing a little girl to the mines, bad idea. And especially traveling with, like, she's not built for travel. You know, like, she wouldn't have made that, like, every day consistently. But they warned her every day, do not let anybody come in. Don't let anybody in. Don't let anybody. They didn't just say the stepmother, like, don't let anybody in. Don't let anybody in. Don't let anybody in. Like, they drilled that into her. And my goodness, Why are we skimped out on the dwarves in every retelling? If this is the original and how awesome the dwarves are, why do we go down from there? Why? Okay. There are 2 points I want to make that it entirely revolves around the queen. First off, it says that she is envious. She is jealous and envious and jealous. Just constantly, all the time. She's green with envy. She's yellow with envy. Her heart, like, with envy. I talked about earlier in an earlier episode how envy will not let you have rest. Like it literally says here, as much and then she was finally at rest, as much rest as an envious heart could have. And that's so true. So true. Like, envy will get the best of you and turn you, like, they call it the green-eyed monster, and it's true. Like, if you let that envy control, like, okay, granted, most people experience envy or jealousy at some point. Letting it, and there are a lot of people who will say, oh, the second you show envy, you're a terrible person, you gotta suppress that. No. It's a normal emotion, especially if it's something you care about and then someone's doing really good at it. Part of you is gonna be like, dang, I wanna be that good. That's normal. That's okay. Letting it control your life? No. Don't do that. Because that's when you get the monster. Like, she was consumed to the point she was willing to murder a little girl. She was like, I need to murder her so that I can be the prettiest again. Like, hold up, what? Back it up a second, lady. No, that is not a good, you are not thinking straight. And then, like, she stopped at nothing until Snow White was consumed. Like, she was consumed, and she's like, if I don't destroy her, I can't become me again. Like, I have to destroy her to become me again. False. What you gotta do to become you again is destroy that envy so that you are accepting of where you're at. Because you're valid. Not murdering little girls. Don't do that. Oh, jeez. And then I don't know what she was thinking. She's like, bring the heart back to me. And then she's like, cook. Fry it up a little, put some salt on it. Then she ate it. I don't know what she was thinking. I really don't. Like, I honestly don't know what that thought process was. But it just seems to me like she was like, if I don't consume and get rid of Snow White and just, like, take what she had and put it into me so that everyone's like, oh, she's obviously better than Snow White. Like, that's the only explanation I can come up with, except she's, creepy. Okay. Where's that wicked king's mom, stepmother, witch lady now, claiming the woman's a child eater? Okay. And then, so yes, envy will consume you. Consumed. Don't let it consume you. Like, you gotta feel it. So you gotta feel it. But you also gotta, like, get rid of it. Like, feelings are like waves in the ocean. Some of them are, like, big and you gotta ride out. Some of them are little. But, like, if you spend all the time running away from the wave, you've just expended a bunch of useless energy for no reason. But if you, like, chase the wave and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna just sit in this wave, that's also not good either. You're gonna probably drown. So, yeah, don't drown. The last point I wanted to make is that the queen did so her very best to her very, very, very best to destroy Snow White. She took on different forms to do that. She sent someone else to do it. She made herself look like one old woman, then a different old woman, then a country woman. Like, she changed speech patterns, like, she changed disguises, she changed tactics as much as she was able so she could catch Snow White. And the dwarves warned her. They're like, no, just because she doesn't look like your stepmom doesn't mean she's not your stepmom. Like, this person's evil. This person is evil and will do nothing to stop, like, will stop at nothing to hurt you. To hurt you. And so she does. She does her very best to hurt Snow White. And I think we've spent, honestly, yes, it's Snow White's fault for not following the dwarves' directions, and dialectic toast, spread it around, and the woman was bent on hurting her, so it would have been really extremely hard for her to have escaped in the end, especially because she's young, and trusting, and innocent, and a little bit naive. Are those things bad? No, absolutely not. However, you gotta also be smart. Because there are people and things that are designed to hurt you. And I think part of it is honestly society's fault. Because the dwarves, they tried to explain to her that don't let anybody in, but they didn't quite make that connection of your stepmother will look like different things and use different ways to hurt you. She's a little girl. I wouldn't want to try and hash that out 100% to a little girl either. But we need to be clear, because honestly, we've spent so much time with the wolf in sheep's clothing analysis that we forget about other dangerous animals in sheep's clothing, or just dangerous animals in general, or learning to listen to the situation instead of just this one instruction. Like, don't talk to strangers. Well, what if that stranger's a paramedic and you've just fallen off your bike and really hurt yourself? And you don't have a parent around. And so the paramedic's trying to help you. What if there's I think we need to spend opinion alert. I think we need to spend more time talking about learning to read a situation and how you're feeling about it, rather than blanket statements or stereotypes or anything like that. Because you don't know what it's going to be. You can drill statistics as much as you want, but in the end it might, it might not be statistically probable, the situation you find yourself in, and it's still happening. So, listen to your feelings. That's what I'm saying. Even in the end, if it didn't end up being a bad situation, you listened to yourself and you listened to what you felt needed to happen, and that gaining that confidence and that self-awareness is so important to just everyday situations. Whew. But seriously, back to the dwarves. Oh my gosh, I loved their characters. Oh, I'm so mad now at every single retelling that does not make the dwarves as good as they were in this one. Okay, thank you for joining us for another happily ever after, or not so happily ever after. That's up for you to decide, and what you decide is valid. Because you're valid, you are. Either way, this is the end for the episode, so tune in later and we can learn more and turn a new page together.